front cabin upstairs. Do have a seat. There's a narrow aisleway. It needs to be kept clear. And also the front-facing windows, upper deck, they wrap around the stairway, the windows. Use them only briefly, please, for photography. They're used by the crew for navigation. Now the carrier. As we come up to the number 11, the big, tall center spot of the carrier, if you go behind it, past that big white building, there are two silver rectangular towers. One of them has a couple of white satellite dishes near the top. This is a replica of World Trade Center. Same structural design. Now the Twin Towers are not going to be built again downtown as they were. Up to those three, part of the Museum on the History of Sea, Air, and Space. We'll make a turn here now. Manhattan's going to shift over to the left side of the vessel. 7 miles upstream, the big George Washington Bridge should carry about 500,000 people back and forth today. And when we complete our turn, we'll be almost exactly over the spot where the airplane hit the water. In a bit over 3 years since Flight 1549 landed on the Hudson River, that is easily the most asked question. So it happened right here, and that is why we went out in rescue. It happened right near us. We'll talk more about it later in the trip. Meanwhile, New Jersey straight ahead of us, going to shift over on the right. Manhattan will shift over to the left side of our vessel, and we'll head downriver. Parking Violations Bureau. If your car gets towed away in town, it will wind up there. Last year, a record number hauled off our streets, 136,632 cars. That building helped to generate over $51 million to the city of New York. Parking violation fines, another record last year. And the black windowed building behind it under renovation, that's our big convention center. Now behind the center, past a little strip of orange, a yellow crane, that's working on the new subway stop for the very first time ever. Subways are going to come to the west side here. So this whole section just over here with an idea that worked beautifully. He said to the Dutch for whom he worked, your fortune is much closer than the Orient. Here's proof. From this island to Manhattan, he brought back samples of the most popular furs in Europe, very inexpensively obtained and very good quality. So the Dutch settled here in Lower Manhattan. They settled the town of New Amsterdam for the fur trade. And it very well. Tower 7. The original Tower 7 fell as well, with very little public notice. Nobody was in the building when it collapsed of structural damage late in the day. It has been rebuilt. So beside us here, this light, curving silver building. 7 is behind it, to the right of it. Smaller construction is tower number 4, going back up. So ground zero is 1 block inland. It extended from the big, tall construction all the way across past the steam and the other construction, and past the flags here on the water. It's open to the public now. We're going to talk more about that on our way back up the river. And our glass building, great viewing area, right across the street. The biggest construction site in our country. Now we'll leave the river here. We're going to drop behind this barge here. Staten Island, New York, up ahead on our left. And down the Sunlight, about 6 miles on the left, is the big Verrazano Bridge. There's 5 miles from there to open ocean. Brooklyn is on the left of the bridge, and Staten Island on the right of it. Coming up on our right is a red port of entry. You're not sticking around. They're going somewhere else. You provide the transportation, they're going to come to you. In our case, that is 80%, or 4 out of 5 of the 11 million people leaving Ellis. 80% of them never set foot in New York City. No interest. They're here for transportation. They come to the place, and they were the support buildings, such as dormitories and dining halls, staff quarters and hospitals, long shut down. In our country's early days, Mr. Ellis not the only man with a private island down here. Isaac Petlo's Island is 3 University Brooklyn on our right. If Brooklyn remained a city on its own, that would be the fourth largest city of our country, easily the most populous part of town. This waterfront here on the right used to be cargo port back in the late 1800s, all the way up to the bridge. Being converted to a park now. And just behind the double roadway, the smaller buildings of red and white, built in the mid-1800s. Homes of the wealthy over in Brooklyn, a section called Brooklyn. I grab your attention. Back in 1807, Robert Fulton invented something radical, a steamboat. The steamboat landing and the ticket office there on the right to call your attention to it. To his dismay, for the first weeks of his operation, most of the folks who came to the lighthouse never bought a ticket. They came to watch the boats blow up. But they didn't, they started to use them, and they were a big success. Work going on the bridge above us. This is for terrorism. Unfortunate bridges and tunnels are being strengthened for that reason. And on our left, all the way up to Midtown, most every building here is some form of reduced price housing. Have over 1 million subsidized apartment buildings in New York City. And the curving big red building in the background left is the center of Chinatown, the vast historic part of our city. The blue bridge coming up is the man. That is right after Manhattan Bridge, that's a Rambo. The names are getting a little stranger. Manhattan on our left is one of the real small counties of our nation. To the right, 22, one of the 7 that power the city. We'll see you on the other side of it. We're headed for the Williamsburg Bridge. Marble, that's the UN. And as you clear the bridge, here on the right is one of the, in fact it's the only old industrial plant from the 1800s. The waterfront used to be lined with them. This is from 1837. Ever since 1837, sugar has been processed here on the waterfront. And in the mid-1800s, about 70% of all refinery of sugar and orchards, all of that is gone now. Inland on the right, with a steeply slanted rooftop for solar heating, the silver building is Citicorp, the banking company. And we will clear Roosevelt Island here on the right and come to the United Nations. UN is on the waterfront. The black tall tower is a residence building just back behind the trees. Trees are part of the UN park with the steam there. And the first new building of the United Nations in over 60 years is the little white one. And that's here at the seaport, there's an office of tickets, TPTS, another one in Times Square. There's the folks that sell Broadway and off-Broadway tickets to shows on a same-day basis. Good news is that is a clearinghouse for all theater that day. Most of the shows about half price. You can buy them all at the same building. One at the seaport. TKTS is also up at Times Square. Now here comes Wall Street. Streets are named for history downtown. The cream-colored building coming up on the right, Wall Street will be just past it, coming into the river under the purple, and before you get to the black building with the vertical stripes. Now there was a wall of defense there built by the Dutch town of New Amsterdam back in the mid-1600s. Walls do not hold up buildings, beams inside do, so you can use anything you want. Mr. Chrysler would build a head of empire and go higher than 80 floors. Forcing the guy from General Motors, building Empire State, to make a decision. Let Mr. Chrysler stay as the tallest building in the world, and General Motors will lose to Chrysler. Or keep going. Well, they kept going, almost into bankruptcy. When Empire State opened their doors, they had announced they had beaten Chrysler in height. They sure had. But the problem was, when they opened the doors of Empire State, it's 1931, there's an American economic depression. The building is 21% occupied, that's it. They're not going to be able to pay off the extra construction costs that way. They would have to come up with an idea to save the building. Meanwhile, Mr. Chrysler couldn't resist it. He called it the Empty State Building. These guys from Chrysler built something big, but it's not going to last. Chrysler is better. Empire did last, and we'll talk about how they did it on the way back downriver. Meanwhile, we're about a half a mile from the United Nations, which is up ahead on the waterfront left, green glass tower, part of the UN, white buildings in front of it the same.
Das ist jetzt hier, das ist die Höhe von der Arbeit. Das ist die Höhe. So, liegt da, was ist da? Jetzt sind wir ein bisschen weiter hoch. Mal hoch. Wieder, was ist das wieder? Wasser, das ist ein Schütter.